You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's account is from a man that mourned the loss of his best friend and trying to escape his thoughts with a midnight drive through the dark woods of New Hampshire. But what he found on Stevens Hill Road wasn't closure. It was 8.5 feet tall, humanoid, intelligent, and staring back at him through a cloud of frozen breath. This is the story of Evan and what he saw that night. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Evan today from New Hampshire Sasquatch. You may have heard that term brought up in maybe a Small Town Monster production about New Hampshire. But Evan, welcome to the show. How's it going today?
Hey, Jeremiah, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, it's tough to get people from your state or New England onto the show. I talk to a lot of people from, Pacific Northwest, but it is always fun to talk to people from New England. I myself grew up about 500 feet away from New Hampshire. That's over in on Route 10, just kind of south of Keene and Swansea and all that area. So I think in a different area of the state, but New Hampshire is such a beautiful area, and I'm finding more and more that there are definitely there's Bigfoot activity happening in this state. Listeners will remember that I actually just talked to an individual that I hope this will be out that had a few things happen in Bear Brook State Park just outside of Concord in Manchester, I believe. So, Evan, do you mind taking a few minutes talking about sharing how you were able to first get involved with the Sasquatch phenomenon to begin with?
Yeah, so back in, I believe it was 2019, right before the pandemic started, my ex-girlfriend actually had the idea of me starting a page after I had an encounter the year prior in 2018. And basically, it was a perfect time frame. I just had my kid in January of 2020, and that's where I really started kicking it off. I wanted to get a little bit more representation for New Hampshire as a whole, and the Northeast for that matter, since I've grown into that footprint, so to say. So I try to give a voice to the people that really don't have like these outlets like they do out in the Pacific Northwest or the far South. Up in the Northeast, it's really taboo, to say the least. Yeah, we have like the Cryptozoology Museum up in Portland, Maine, but we really don't have a lot otherwise. A lot of the BFRO researchers aren't exactly active anymore. So I decided to jump in and take that little space in there, kind of fill the power gap in a way.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like you kind of got involved with things around, well, really probably the same time that a lot of people listening to this, there was, around the time of the pandemic and 2019 and et cetera, 2020, a lot of people, I think, got into the subject because they were bored or they need something to do. And, mine was, I got started around February 2019 myself. But, you mentioned that you had an actual sighting that kind of kicked things off as well. Do you mind sharing about what you experienced with your sighting out there in New Hampshire?
Yeah, so this happened the night of Thanksgiving, back in 2018. So I was driving around one night on Stevens Hill Road over in Nottingham, New Hampshire, and I was going pretty quickly. At the time, I was mourning the loss of one of my best friends that passed away just prior. And as I was taking a corner on Stevens Hill Road, my high beams and my 2015 Nissan Altima that I had at the time picked up what I thought to be reflectors on a tree. And as I got closer, basically an arm raised up to block out what I came to find out was these creatures' eyes. This creature that I affectionately nicknamed Quincy, based off the pond that's just to the south, literally a couple 100 feet away from where I had my encounter, was standing on the side of the road, almost like I caught it in mid-stride. And I remember I came to a stop. I can't exactly remember how far it was away. I think it was around like 20, 30 feet roughly. And I stopped, and as I was sitting there, it slowly lowered its arm away from its eyes. And its eyes were like this brick auburn red reflection. It wasn't like it was eyeshine. It was not any form of bioluminescence or like glowing. I only knew this because it turned its head at one point and it lost that eyeshine. So it kind of looks at me kind of like a disappointed parent would, kind of like, what are you doing here? Kind of like scolding me. And as I'm sitting there, just in utter awe, it puffs out its cheeks and a plume of steam from its mouth just absolutely basically makes like a cloud around it because of the cold weather and all that. And then it turns, looks over to its left, looks back, and then goes down the hill to the side. A couple of descriptions about this creature. Well, this being that I noticed and has stuck with me. Some people make fun of me for it, hence Brian Garvey, for example, one of your former guests. I did observe genitalia. It was certainly a male. And its forearms had longer hair on it, almost kind of like orangutan's. And I can see when it had its arms up, it had the kind of like a reddish orange tint. Otherwise, the hair was black, but that was from the high beams going through like the hair follicles and that type of stuff and all the strands of hair. And you can see little bits of frost that were entangled in the hair as well.
Just want to point out real quick, if people know the YouTube channel, was Brian and Chewy Go Hiking, that's the Brian Garvey that was just referred to. He's a good guy.
Yeah,
he's a
funny guy. Yeah, I love Brian. I love Brian.
He's a funny guy. So that is extremely interesting, man. It makes you wonder, like the part where you said it puffed out its cheeks. I wonder
if big exhale.
Yeah, I wonder if it made any noise, but you wouldn't have been able to hear because you're inside the car. But you hear so many witnesses. Sometimes they'll say like it made a noise, like a huff or a huffing noise. You know what I mean?
So when I was in my car, I remember I was specifically listening to a song called Campfire Cologne, and I remember I was not able to hear it. Hear the Quincy, as I call him, make the noise, and I had it pretty high up in volume, to say the least. Trying to drown out the thoughts of loss in a way. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of scared to know what it would sound like if I did hear it without anything disturbing us, like the music.
And remind me again how recent it was that you had. So that the loss you were going through, that was very, very recent.
Within 20, 30 days. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The guy that passed away was basically, I grew up with him. He was basically my brother at that point. So.
have you, this is a tricky topic, because there's, this really emotional time that is involved for you, but it's a pattern that I've noticed where sometimes if there's like a really intense traumatic event that can have some kind of connection with these sightings. Have you ever thought of that yourself, or have any thoughts about that?
I really haven't thought about it too much. As I've began to research and all that. I'm not a fan of the whole supernatural aspect of it, or some other questionable topics that some people claim to believe in. But I have heard, as you mentioned, of people having a traumatic experience before that, before their encounter. It's very possible. Maybe just, I think our paths just crossed in life. That's all I think it was. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time, or in the wrong place at the wrong time, as some people would say, when they come across something that can be as life-changing as a sighting.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if I will keep this in, but for curiosity's sake, because you did bring it up. So when you visually saw that it was a male, is that just that it was quite evident, or were there things happening that made Brian pretty much make fun of you for it because you brought it up?
He's, I love Brian. Me and him joke around about it all the time. It's just funny because not a lot of people bring it up. Let's just say I just got a good view of it for the most part, since it was right at my head level, straight ahead.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So,
Totally.
And we joke around about it when we go to Whitehall, and, we meet up for other excursions and that type of stuff. Every once in a while, we'll always poke fun at it. But yeah, I'm not sure how much in detail you want me to go down on that.
Yeah, it is really, you bring up the point where, and some witnesses do definitely bring this up, is that just the viewpoint of in being in a car like that, you were kind of lower on the ground, right?
Lower mid-size, lower mid-size sedan. I mean, around that height, yeah.
Gotcha.
Probably would be around its hip area, would be the top of the car, roughly. Probably a little bit lower.
Did you notice anything out of the ordinary, the way that it was moving as it continued to walk into the woods?
Just that it was covered in a good bit of hair, but it wasn't like seeing a deer. It wasn't like, you can tell that this thing, had more than two brain cells that just told it to, walk across the road, eat, and breed.
Mm-hmm.
This thing definitely had an intelligence to it. I don't want to call it predatory, but it definitely had this conscious, look to it. It was, the more and more I think about it, it had a purpose on how it was moving. It was thinking, and we actually have a theory that came up after this. I don't want to get too far, but it might have been looking out for another individual as well.
Gotcha.
But it expressed attitude and questioning in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the face was definitely why are you here? A person isn't supposed to be out here at this time of night.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, there's a difference, at least I think personally, and other people might think differently, but you look at an animal like let's say a deer. You look at a human, and you're looking at a different type of thing. I mean, yeah, one can show emotions, the other one not really, unless I just don't get out in the woods, and I'm not a hunter, so maybe they do, and I just don't know. But yeah, it's extremely interesting. You were able to see, take a look in its face for a bit. And I'm sure you've heard different people talk about how the Bigfoot looked when they had their sighting. Were there any features about the face that stick out in your memory that were like, yeah, that the one thing was just very, very strange?
I'm going to quote Animal Planet from back in the day, and I'll say surprisingly human. Their old motto that they have there. I describe the face as looking almost like of like Pacific Island descent or like Native American descent. Just like the facial features, like some of the cheek, the nose structure, the brow structure. It looked a lot more like a human or like proto-human than it would have like an ape.
That makes sense. Were you able to notice anything about the eyes at all?
Nothing besides like the actual like eyeshine that was reflecting. I mean, they're pretty big eyes, but like I mentioned to you before, eyes are like the doorway to the soul.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell that there was something intelligent behind its eyes. It's not just blankly looking at you like a moose or a deer that are just programmed off of just instinct and, either the need of food or water, shelter, or reproduction or self-perseverance.
Absolutely.
Preservation, my apologies.
I may have missed taking a note on this. Did you happen to mention how tall you would approximate it to be?
So before Brian and I went out to, investigate it, I believed it to be around the high 6s, low 7s, 7, maybe 7.5 or lower in that area. When we went back out, we measured it. It was around the 8.5 foot. Around the 8.5 foot area. And the way that I tell where I can go with, the reason why I can have such a good reference with it is this road, Stevens Hill Road. And it's just a very, very, it's pretty narrow dirt road. It's not too narrow. You can still get by with 2 vehicles. But when the snow plows go through there, the snow plows are hitting trees and all different types of stuff. So there's a nice nasty mark from a snow plow on one of the trees that I can identify where I had the encounter. And that's a reference point that I have. And that's where we measured off of.
Gotcha. You'd mentioned moose earlier, and I've taken a few trips up to northern New Hampshire, so I've seen more than a few moose, and I'm sure you have as well. How did this guy, or what you saw, how did it? If you were to put it next to a normal size, let's say male moose, would it be around the same size or a little bit shorter, or what do you think?
I got to be really subjective with the whole moose thing because there is a lot of different sizes when it comes to moose. I mean, you have the ones that range up from like Alaska. I mean, even in this area in New Hampshire, you have like some that are definitely off of some different like, gene pool. I meant to call them the Northern Giants for like just how big they actually can be. I would say that it was probably around the size of, or a little bit bigger than a full-grown bull.
Okay.
So
Wow.
definitely big. And that was one of the things that I like. If it was a little bit, shorter, around like the 6 foot, around that area, I would say like, yeah, it was around the same size or a little bit bigger. But this thing was definitely bigger after the amount of moose I've seen, and comparing it, especially when I went out recently and just thought about that exact topic. This thing was bigger. It wasn't a whole lot bigger, but it wasn't like this big like tank. It was muscular. It was proportionate. Some people would describe the Sasquatch that they see as blocky. Mine was more like a kind of like an athletic build. But yeah, I mean, definitely was bigger than probably a bull, not including the antlers.
Gotcha. Some people witnesses will describe the head shape in different ways. Do you remember anything to do with the shape of the head of what you saw?
It was more or less a regular shape. I know a lot of people, and this is where I go back and reflect on, a lot of people describe it as like a gorilla or even like a chimpanzee or anything like that. There was no like conical head shape. It was a pretty normal head shape. Then again, it did have a good bit of hair, so that could be deceiving. And you also have to remember, it was nighttime. It was pretty dark out, especially in that area. So there was that aspect of it, but I do not recall seeing any conical shape. I don't remember like seeing like the kind of like the neck muscles making it. It was kind of like necklace, as people describe. It was very, very close to like a extremely large human being. So, as I would describe, with primal features.
Right. Did it show its teeth at any time when you were looking at it?
So from what I recall, it did not like flare its teeth at all. I know a lot of primates, as like a sign of aggression, people will like say, "Oh, the monkey's smiling at me at the zoo," or anything like that, and it will be the territorial display or just like a threatening display, kind of like chimps do. Nothing like that at all.
When you had this sighting and then it went away into the woods, how did this immediately affect you at that point?
More or less. I mean, I was younger back then. If I was older, I'd probably have a better hold on my emotions and that type of stuff and able to process it more. But it was more likely, well, it was more so, I just saw a Sasquatch.
Before this sighting you had, was it a thing where you were into the subject at all, or did it just, this came out of, left field and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm having a sighting, what is this? Or did you already kind of know what you were in the middle of?
So I was in my younger years. I was into cryptozoology. As I got older, into my mid-late teens and that type of stuff, that's where I started to sort of lose interest in a way. And because I was seeing a lot of like just fake stuff popping up and a lot of people promoting, fake, blatantly fake and hoaxes, which is basically at the point that I was. But yes, I did have a little bit of interest in, the unknown, Bigfoot, yes, was one of them, but it wasn't like a total like Bigfoot on the brain sort of thing.
Right. It sounds like you were not going out that night to be like, okay, I'm going to go see if I can see a Bigfoot.
I'm going to go look for a Bigfoot.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you were probably just, I would guess, trying to clear your head, and that's when it happens.
Yeah. It was a pretty traumatic time, as you can imagine. And I mean, yeah, like, have I played around with like the thought of Bigfoot before, and, the idea of squatching at that point? Yeah. I mean, because that was at like the golden age of, that sort of TV, finding Bigfoot was in a pretty good swing back then. A lot of people are watching Finding Bigfoot, which I definitely don't believe a lot of, the mainstream media stuff at all. But, it's the friends I had back then, we were definitely into like the whole adventuring. We were hiking a lot, all that type of stuff. We love the sense of adventure and the unknown. But that's as far as I would put it.
So then after you have this sighting, and then I would imagine you keep on driving, do you end up going directly to home? Do you talk to people about what happened, or is this something where you keep it to yourself for a while?
I kept it to myself for a while. I didn't really speak to anybody after my buddy's funeral. So I kept it to myself, and I only brought it up to my ex because she brought it up, and, it took a little bit of time for me to bring it up to her. But, she brought it up, like the whole mystery and unknown stuff before that. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely took me a while. Then I started hearing podcasts and all that type of stuff, people sharing their encounters, experiences. And then I realized, as I mentioned, like, hey, I'm not hearing anything about New Hampshire. I'm not hearing anything about the Northeast or anything like that. So, the thought of it kind of, welled up over time, and that's how I got here today.
That's awesome. I would imagine that you've probably done a bit of research into this area where you had your sighting. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other situations that you've uncovered or things about the area that kind of helped lend credence to the encounter that you had in that area?
So, I mean, I'm sure you're aware from having Brian Garvey on, and me and him were going to document the areas where we both had our encounters, and this was back in, I believe, 2022, around the end of March. We met up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Portsmouth, Newington, New Hampshire that day. Brian lives down in Rhode Island, so he had to meet me up here, and he had his encounter up in northern New Hampshire, up in the White Mountains, with his tent encounter. So we were going to go document those, kind of get like a whole gist of what happened, kind of like storytelling in the way that like what happened with me here today. So we go to Stevens Hill Road, and we pull out a little pull-off area right down the road, and Brian always has his GoPro on, even for Chewy. So as we're walking, he is recording, and I point out the area and where it happened along the side of the road. And I'm always looking at the ground for tracks, always trying to observe. And to the right side of the road, there was an impression that Chewy almost stepped in. So I told Chewy, hey, Chewy, no, kind of get him away from the area. And I'm kind of looking at it, and it's the shape of a bipedal, foot, along the lines of what a person's or a Sasquatch's a humanoid footprint. I see toe impressions, so I stand up. I'm just like, I mean, I'm sure for the people that might have seen the video, we're both freaking out. We could not believe at that point that we possibly came across an impression like that. So Brian and I decide to, look around. I found one more impression on the right side of the road where we found the original print, and a couple other, indentations in the leaves behind it. And on Brian's side of the road, he's looking on his side, and he finds it's basically what I can remember, the best track that we got out of the trackway up on the side of the slope, going towards the woods, and a set of power lines, which I'll get to with you later. But we found very prominent toe impressions, and we're freaking out, and we call our friend Alex Pedikov, which I'm sure, I know you're familiar with. So we get him out there, and we get everything properly documented, because there's, to our knowledge, besides what someone had on the BFRO, there is not a properly cataloged trackway in the state of New Hampshire, or for the most part in the Northeast in general. So that was our goal at the time. Had some weird encounters with the local people passing through there, in which I've never seen more cars pull through there, and you just have me standing with my vehicle right over one of the tracks to try to make sure no one hit it. And even to the point that someone with a little boat pulled up, tried to get down to Quincy Pond, which is a small little boat ramp sort of thing. You can only bring like a little paddle boat or canoe or anything like that with a trolling motor or anything. That's the biggest nautical vehicle that you can bring. And I'm standing over there in the way of these guys, and I don't want to tell them what's going on, because I don't want to look like a crazy person, even though I was basically making myself look like a crazy person standing over this track, making sure that they don't step in it. We got some pretty good casts from that. We got it well documented. Alex called up Cliff Barrickman, try to get some tips on how to cast these things, because we just want to have these things properly cast and properly documented. Got his help, and Alex sent out, photos and that type of stuff to different researchers and that type of stuff. So, that was definitely one of the biggest things that happened at that location, to say the least. I mean, especially almost exactly in the same spot that I had my encounter years prior.
That's fantastic. And as you're talking about that, the events, I'm like, okay, yeah, I remember. I am remembering this now. Yeah. But it's so cool that it happened in pretty much the same area. Have you heard of other actual sightings happening in the same area as well?
Yeah, actually. So, real quick, I apologize for getting sidetracked, but there was a theory that we came up with, because we believe that the Sasquatch that I saw was definitely bigger, would produce bigger prints. Mm-hmm. We believe that there's possibly a juvenile that night when I was out there, and that those prints were possibly the same juvenile from that made the prints. Definitely older now, but I believe that's the reason why Quincy looked over to his side, possibly to get maybe a member of his family or anything like that, a chance for them to get away by distracting me by standing there like he did and not just taking off immediately. So there's that. That's a little theory that we have about that one. But yes, back to what you're saying with encounters in the area, we actually uncovered a fair number of encounters that happen within that vicinity. And when it comes to that, Quincy Pond is a great water source for them. And it's also right off a huge set of power lines that go across a good portion of the state, at least the eastern part of the state. And there was one guy that was directly through the woods that had two different town police officers come out to investigate something that clearly had 2 feet stomping around his property in the ice in the marsh behind his property. I cannot bring up his name because he does not want to share his name the last time I checked with him. But he was interviewed by Alex on the Small Town Monsters documentary. It was a smaller documentary that they did for that. I believe it was a Beyond the Trail episode. But yeah, we had a report come off of the BFRO, which I have yet to find out who exactly this person is, but I am familiar with the area itself that where it happened. And they reported seeing a blue-eyed Sasquatch while they were riding a bike, which is pretty intriguing, which I've never heard of that. But it's definitely very, very interesting in that case. And there's been reports from Bear Brook, which isn't far away. A couple years ago, I was talking to a woman. I complimented her on her shirt. She had a Bigfoot on her shirt, and that was stealing some beer. And I told her a nice shirt, and she looked at me and she was like, "Oh, thank you. They're real, right?" She told me about that, saying that she saw one cross the road on Route 4, which is just to the north. Didn't get a lot of info out of her since I was working at a different place at that time. And it would not be appropriate for me to go on and ask stuff like that. But yeah, so we uncovered quite a bit of reports, and even some that came from Pawtuckaway to the south, to Pawtuckaway State Park, which is a fairly busy and heavily trafficked state park. But there is some pretty wild areas in there that not a lot of people go.
That is really interesting. So there's people that have had visual sightings in Pawtuckaway, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
There's been vocal encounters in Pawtuckaway. I believe I have a couple on my page. Unfortunately, I need to get a lot more organized with my research stuff since I was out of it for a little bit. And, being someone that was in their early 20s when they first started out, Instagram was my main way of storing my documents. And unfortunately, I did lose some based off of, from Google and, trusting to save messages on Instagram, where some people would actually send it and they would have, I believe it's called vanish mode on. So it would delete their encounter. And I wish I could reach out to those people, but people are pretty skeptical and pretty... Well, they like to keep to themselves with stuff around here. It's very taboo, the topic of Sasquatch in the Northeast, to say the least. Besides if you go to like Whitehall or one of those areas. Because there's definitely a lot of crazy people that, they claim that, Bigfoot took their beef jerky or something weird like that. Or Bigfoot goes into their house and has tea with them. Which that's literally some things that I have reports on.
Oh, gosh. And you've taken those yourself, you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you got to vet a lot of the people that, I mean, send you reports. I had about 150 reports, a little bit over, since I started. It's definitely slowed down a little bit because I haven't been too active over the last year to 2 years. But I plan to get more active, thankfully, with that. But yeah, there's been way too many people that are out there that think that, I mean, Sasquatch and aliens will go in their living room and that type of stuff, or walk right up to their house in the middle of a city. For some people that I know, they know the story of an individual that had aliens going into his house, as well as Sasquatch coming to dance on his property, listening to music in the middle of downtown Nashua. So, which is pretty out there.
It's pretty intense.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any thoughts? You know, well, I would, if a person who's not familiar with Sasquatch, if I said, hey, look at a map of New Hampshire, make sure that you can see where the mountains are, what's your guess as to where the Sasquatch are? They'd probably say, oh, I'm seeing all these mountains up to the north where it says White Mountain National Forest. Do you think that these are sightings spread out pretty much all throughout the entire state, or do you think there's just parts where there's going to be more sightings like this area that you guys have kind of found in the southeast part of the state?
Well, so I look into a lot of areas, not just New Hampshire and not just southern New Hampshire. I actually just had a report come to me from a pretty, I don't want to say the exact area, but an area of some high strangeness, as I gotta say. A lot of history, Bigfoot, even UFOs, ghosts, that type of stuff. It's a lesser known area. It's actually referred to as a triangle. I'm just going to say the name of not the exact name of the area, but it's called the Osipee Triangle, which is basically New Hampshire's, either Bennington Triangle or the Bridgewater Triangle down in Mass. So, I mean, there's definitely some hotspot areas that we have up here in New Hampshire, but they are pretty widespread. We even have some reports that come closer to the seacoast, which is pretty surprising. Some of them aren't the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Probably reliable source, but a lot of them are the reliable sources come from like these very obscure and remote areas. And I always try to look for reports that have specific areas with them, but they definitely appear to like to travel along the power lines. And the warmer areas, the warmer pockets, such as like cedar swamps, where like moose will also go into in the winter, or where like the food is, in season, such as blueberries. We don't have like the elk herds and different type of game area animals that they do over in the Pacific Northwest. So it's not like a whole thing of them like migrating in the same spot, tracking herds and all that type of stuff. Blueberry season, when that comes around, yes, I have noticed a correlation with that. I noticed that quite a few of them are in mountain corridors and even the Appalachian Trail. But I can definitely tell you this, when it comes to reports, I think I may have, besides my own, a couple reports that happened in the wintertime, or at least when all the leaves are off the trees, even though mine happened on Thanksgiving, that I haven't seen much that go on beyond that. They are definitely food driven as it appears around here. And I think that if they were around up here in the wintertime, we have an extremely active winter motorsports and even snow sports in general. I think there would definitely be a lot more track fines or anything like that if they were staying up here year round, or if they were traveling around in the wintertime at least. I definitely think they might go south or in southern areas via the AT or different routes like that.
And to provide some examples, there's a lot of listeners that won't really get the whole winter motorsports thing. It's such a big deal. Like, you've got snowmobiles or snow machines, however you want to call them, in New Hampshire. From southern New Hampshire, you can drive a snowmobile all the way up to the Canadian border. Or at least you used to be able to. I don't know if you can anymore.
Correct.
But
yeah, you still can. There's multiple ways of doing it, and you can go completely unnoticed by a car, for that matter. Someone driving a car. From most people, besides hearing your snowmobile or anything like that.
Absolutely. Have you ever heard any reports of interactions where a Bigfoot has been seen, like, taking down a moose or anything? I was just trying to think. I don't think I have myself personally.
So I don't believe I have anything about a moose specifically. I have heard reports of them like taking deer down. I have one report of one that was walking down a back road in Stratford County with one hanging over its shoulder as I was walking using the path of least resistance down the road. And I've definitely had, and this is another thing that's going to bother my buddy Brian Garvey. He'll know with the Mount Cabot report that we have, they seem to be not so friendly towards dogs, at least a good portion of them. When a dog will go after them, or they'll try to ambush a dog at times, as it seemed with the Mount Cabot report. It's definitely more aggression towards them with dogs, but I haven't heard anything as in like moose, for example. I mean, moose are few and far between up here anyways. Like, you won't even notice them half the time if they're standing in the wood line on the side of the road. They're very obscure. Not a lot of people go, tracking them. It's not very smart, to say the least. And I've definitely had some not so smart choices that I've made myself with a moose, but they're very, very obscure. And if something like that is able to hide, such as a moose, Sasquatch, or, what we call Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, I don't think they would, especially with their level of intelligence, they wouldn't have an issue getting around undetected themselves.
Yeah, moose are such a weird thing. You don't mess with them because they'll walk right over your car. That's for sure. You better hit it in reverse and get out of there. At least that's what I've saw up in northern New Hampshire back in the day. Do you have any thoughts, getting back to Bigfoot, do you have any thoughts about what you think it is that we're dealing with when, let's say, a person asks, hey, what do you feel Bigfoot is out there? Maybe a undiscovered primate or a lost ancestor on the human tree. Any thoughts about that?
So, I'm a fairly big believer. I mean, if not entirely, I think it can go down two different ways. You have like Gigantopithecus blacki, which is in our fossil records, which is basically a Sasquatch all of its own, basically to the T. I mean, it's a lot bulkier, but we have that in the fossil records. And the way that we actually discovered that creature was in old Chinese medicine shops, where they would actually grind up the teeth of Gigantopithecus as medicine. So there is that. So who's to say that, there's not other places that are, such as like native tribes and that type of stuff, which almost every single Native American tribe, at least natives to North America and around the world, we all have our own stories of Sasquatch. Everywhere besides Antarctica has history of Sasquatch from their native tribes, Aboriginal tribes, absolute every single one. So I definitely think that they do break off into like different subgroups. And I think that they are either descendants of, I'm almost certain Gigantopithecus blacki, or at least a relative of that, which, they could have definitely crossed with humans at some point. But I'm not too sure where that would be. I'm not going to say Homo sapien exactly, but it could have been, Homo erectus or anything like that. I think there could have been a common ancestor in that matter.
That's really interesting. It's crazy how with this subject you can get into, just different parts of it. I think that's a big part, is what is it exactly? You can really go down that rabbit trail. Another thing that I've noticed with encounters that I take, and I guess more on the West Coast, but do you guys out there ever get any reports where the witness will say, oh, it looked like an orangutan, or in the face, or the way it was moving? Does that ever come up in witness reports that you receive out there?
So, yeah, we definitely have reports that are different, as in, like, you'll have some that look like an orangutan. You got some that look like a chimpanzee. Even one more recent report described the mouth shape, the jaw shape, as more or less like in a muzzled type of look. I'm not saying like a dog man type of thing, which I'm not exactly a fan of the whole dog man. Not going to go into that, but how many different types of primates are out there? There's many, many types, a lot of which that we even share our DNA with. We're just another type of primate that's walking around. So, we got the ones like mine that look like a proto-human, or like a native person, kind of like the mixed features in that. You have like a gugwi that almost reminds me of, from the reports, of a baboon, which it has the same temperament basically as some baboons, very aggressive. And then you have like the skunk ape that kind of sounds more like an orangutan, or you have the ones that look like a chimpanzee. There's many, many. I believe that there's different types, at least different genetic differences, and possibly different regional variants. You can look at Darwin, for example, down in the Galapagos Islands. You had different types of birds that had different types of beaks based on if they ate seeds or if they cracked nuts or anything like that. So there's a lot of things that you have to look at with evolution. There could be different evolution points. There could be different, traits being passed along, different diets. There's a lot of different things that we have to consider. A lot of different bloodlines. I mean, not all Bigfoot are going to be related to the cousin level in a way. Especially the ones that are being reported over in Australia. Where, I mean, yes, they're similar. They're not exactly the same. But you're not going to have, like, they're not going to be related. They're not going to be, it's going to be like me talking to you. Me and you are probably not related.
Right. Probably not.
So that's where I gotta, throw that point out there. It's definitely not going to be all the same creatures. You're going to have different genes passing through, different traits in general, kind of like blue eyes and brown eyes, or blue eyes, blonde hair, red hair, and, black hair, any of that. That's going to be different. People that have larger noses, some people that have, more pronounced teeth, you're not going to have the same genetics. So yes, I think that there's going to be different mixes between the genealogy between different Sasquatch related creatures.
You mentioned, you brought up most people hold to that there's different, like, almost like different variants, right? Like Gugway, etc.
Yes.
Do you think from the reports that you've seen and taken from New Hampshire, do you think there are different variants in New Hampshire, or is it more one type that's seen over others?
So, yes. Short answer, yes. We up in New Hampshire have our own. Oh, geez. Yeah, you got me going down a rabbit hole right now. This is actually something that you would that'd be a great question for Alex Bedikov with this. Have you ever heard of the New Hampshire wood devil?
Oh yeah, up in Coos County.
Oh yeah, the co-op. Yep, the co-op. Yep. So those are described to be almost like a gangly humanoid. Some are described to be like silver hair, gray hair, kind of like a sickly kind of Sasquatch type of look. Very, very, very slender. So we've had reports from up in Coos County for years and years and years. I mean, dating back to like the logging days up north. The old loggers would say that they wouldn't even notice these creatures standing there because they'll blend right in with the trees. And then when you notice them, it's reported some of them will let off a very terrible scream and run off. So there is those. Actually, with that, I have a theory going on to Algonquin. I don't want to say mythology, but the Algonquin culture, the Wendigo. A lot of people visualize the image of a Wendigo having like a deer skull on its head, with antlers and being like all gaunt and like basically a skeleton. They're not exactly right with that. When you actually look into the actual descriptions of a Wendigo, it's more or less either like a tall, kind of like malnourished, deranged looking person. Very slender. They're not muscular, looking very gaunt with an insatiable hunger. So you have that. What oddly relates to me on that matches the same description in a way as the Coos wood devil, sorry. So there is that. So my theory is that these native cultures were kind of seeing a variant of, what could be Sasquatch, a variant of them, kind of like the Gugway or the skunk ape, but to their own area, such as, as they describe the Wendigo. So that's like the own, like a regional variant for the northeast parts of Canada and those areas, northeast New Hampshire, into Maine. But it got more popular with the whole New Hampshire Coos wood devil instead of, your traditional Sasquatch.
That is really, really interesting. It's, I've never looked a lot into the wood devil. I'm just, kind of more familiar with where it is and a little bit about it, but I'm sure people are still having sightings in that county to this day.
They are, but it's not. I think I have like maybe 1 or 2 reports. I know for sure I have one of a wood devil sighting.
Oh, wow.
But this was from over 20 years ago. Believe it or not, the guy described it almost to have the buttocks were a reddish color, almost like they're inflamed. And it was trying to, I believe from what he was saying, that try to steal fish while he was fishing one of the Connecticut lakes. So there is that, but we don't really get a lot of the reports of the wood devil all too much, especially in more recent times. It's mostly your run-of-the-mill Sasquatch report.
Absolutely. Is there a part in New Hampshire that, it keeps coming up through encounters and you're like, man, I gotta make it over there, but I just haven't been able to make it over there yet?
So I'm not going to share exactly.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people that I wouldn't even call, I basically refer to them as a half a meatball. I won't even give them the liberty of calling them full meatball,
sure,
to say the least.
Yep.
And we have, some researchers that have even, quote unquote researchers that have gone onto people's property without their permission and knocked on their door and that type of stuff, and like at night and all that. So I don't dare to share the exact location. So Grafton County is on the BFRO database, and then you have, even the Bigfoot mapping project. That's a great one right there. But Grafton County has always been the most active according to like the BFRO and certain databases. Now, I would argue that there's some areas in southern New Hampshire that are just as active. But if I would have to say, areas that are basically wild and mostly pristine for the most part, Coos County, Carroll County, and Grafton County, which those are the northern parts of the state, but those are the most, you go out there and it's like walking back in time in some of the areas. That's where a lot of our hiking is. That's a lot, believe it or not, that's where a lot of the tourism is. But that's also where a very, very hefty amount of the moose population is. Now, of course, there's other areas. You got Rockingham County, which does have some reports. Stratford County, which is a county that I actually live in currently, which has actually been on the up and coming, kind of like the underdog in a way. I get some really cool reports from that area. Even though Rockingham County, where I had my encounter, it's pretty close to the Stratford County border. And I've even had some occurrences happen there. I don't so much hear of a lot of stuff happening from like the Belknap County area. And I don't hear too much coming out of like the Peterborough area over, where you said that you were from. So, but I definitely hear a lot of it happening up north in the mountain ranges for sure.
Absolutely.
And, into Maine. Yeah.
That Peterborough area is really interesting. because you had the reports of the Marlboro monkey back in the day.
Yep.
That's kind of around, I think that's around Monadnock. Although I had a person reach out to me once about some sightings they had on Monadnock. They would not come on record. It was like, oh man, okay. Well,
that's how it is around here. Yeah, that's exactly how it is.
Yeah, exactly. But it's wild because that's one of the most, I think it's one of the most hiked mountains in the world. Maybe it's second back, or at least I think it used to be second. But it's been a while since I've checked.
I believe it is. It's the most popular, at least in the Northeast. There's tons and tons of people, and I've had reports come off of Monadnock, specifically 2 that came off the White Arrow Trail, which is very specific, and that's a pretty well-traveled trail. But, Monadnock, there's definitely a lot of people, so naturally you're going to have possibly more reports come from that, where I have had other reports come from Monadnock itself and the surrounding areas, but it's a lot of tourists that don't know, if they could have been looking at a bear. I've been sent, supposed Bigfoot vocalizations that have turned out to be an owl, specifically barred owls when they're in their mating season. So there is that. So there's a lot of misidentification. That's why a lot of people have to be careful with that.
Extremely interesting stuff. Man, it's such a cool state. It's beautiful. One of the last things I want to point out though is, listeners are like, oh yeah, I should just go out and look myself. Guys, it is like, you really got to be careful. Like places like the White Mountains, they're very unforgiving. It's, even though it's New England, like you still have to be really careful when you go out into places like that. Make sure you have the right stuff, and people know where you are. You have someone with you. Like, it's just it's really wild. A lot of people describe New Hampshire as the worst part of the Appalachian Trail. And we have a lot of people die. We have a lot of people go missing. We have a lot of people get hurt in our mountains. They're not like the mountains in the southern Appalachians where, they're gradual, or the ones out west where you're going on switchbacks and that type of stuff and well-maintained trails. You're talking about some areas where you're going to be walking on the side of basically like a cliff in a way, with ice, wet rocks, all that type of stuff. There's a lot of danger. When it comes to that. We might not have like all these dangerous animals like some over in the West. Moose, they're not smart. They're very dangerous. They will charge you. But like, we don't have grizzlies. We have black bears, which are definitely a more watered down version. Just as they can be very dangerous, though. But the most dangerous part of it is our temperatures. We have the worst weather in the world. Mount Washington. We are literally called, where it's literally called the home of the world's worst weather. You can go from having sun and 80-degree weather to having complete fog, rain, thunderstorms in a matter of minutes. It's like, people can and will get hurt, and it's not something that you want to go out and go like, oh, this will be easy. No, don't be stupid. Be prepared, do your research. It's not something that you want to take lightly. We just had a lady a couple weeks ago, might have been last week, who fell off a gorge, and she had her 2 children with her, and she died from that. So it can happen to anybody. It's not something to take lightly. 100%. 100%. Evan, this has been a fascinating conversation about a state that isn't a lot on the show, but I'm glad when it is. Thank you for sharing your knowledge about New Hampshire. Do you mind talking a few minutes about how people can keep up to date with what you are doing with New Hampshire Sasquatch or contact you if needed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main way that people can get in contact with me is New Hampshire Sasquatch at gmail.com. That's all one word. So there is that's the best way to get a hold of me. Otherwise, there is my phone is cut out. There is my Instagram page where that's I'm the most active. Unfortunately, I have not been too active over the last 2 years, but I am getting back into it. I got a research partner out there with me now, but that is New Hampshire Sasquatch New Hampshire Sasquatch on Instagram, and I do have a YouTube channel for New Hampshire Sasquatch. That's not too active, but I promise people I'm going to be getting more active on it. The last 2 years have been rough, especially in the Bigfoot community. There's a lot of things that are hoaxes and a lot of things that kind of degrade some researchers when some things are being put out there that aren't the most kosher, to say the least. But rest assured, I mean, the truth is out there, and you got people like me, Alex Petticoat, Brian Garvey, Mike Lucci, plenty of other different great people that I can list down. We're all out there looking for the truth. And yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me. Like I said, New Hampshire Sasquatch at gmail.com and New Hampshire Sasquatch on Instagram and YouTube.
Fantastic. Well, Evan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jeremiah. It's been a pleasure.
Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Evan's encounter is the kind of story that lingers not just because of what he saw in the dark, but because of how personal and raw the moment was. From a loss that weighed heavy on his soul to a creature that seemed almost aware of him. This story reminds us that sometimes the unexplainable finds us in our most vulnerable moments. A huge thanks to Evan from New Hampshire Sasquatch for sharing his incredible experience and for giving a voice to those in the Northeast who have stayed silent for far too long. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to us on YouTube, hit the bell icon, and share this episode with someone who's into Bigfoot, cryptid lore, or the mysteries hiding in the woods of New England. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit the follow button. And if you can, leave us a positive review. It really helps more people discover these stories on those platforms. And hey, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in New England, I'd love to hear from you. So please email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. And also don't forget Sasquatch Summerfest is happening soon, July 11th through the 12th at Greenwaters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. Bigfoot Society listeners can grab a 2-day pass for the price of 1-day admission using code BFS at checkout. So grab your tickets now at www.sasquatchsummerfest.com. Thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. So see you in the woods.